מאוד מרגש הסיפור הזה. אני והחברים עומלים על ההפקה של הכנס הזה הרבה מאוד זמן. מקווים שתהנו. תודה. שמי עורך דין גיא זקס, אני יושב ראש של עמותת האדומים, עמותת האוהדים של הפועל תל אביב. כרגע אנחנו עמותת האוהדים הגדולה בישראל, ויזמנו את הכנס הזה בשיתוף ארגון היציע. חברנו לארגון היציע בשמחה ובאהבה, כי הבנו שמצבו של האוהד במדינת ישראל הוא בכי רע, והוא נמצא אחרון בסולם העדיפויות. והגענו למסקנה שכנס כזה זה משהו שיכול לשנות ולהתחיל פה איזה סוג של שינוי. עכשיו, זה לא מדובר פה רק שינוי על אוהדי כדורגל, אוהדי כדורסל, זה ממש אוהדים במדינת ישראל, זה הרמה הכי נמוכה של מי שלוקח חלק בנושא הספורט, ובניגוד למקרים ומקומות תקינים בעולם, ואנחנו נקבל פה קצת דוגמאות. אנחנו היינו רוצים פה לצאת מהכנס הזה, הרבה מאוד אנשים שמסרבים להבין שהאוהדים זה מה שמניע את הגלגלים בכל העסק, אי אפשר להתייחס אליהם כלקוחות שבויים. אנחנו אלה שקונים את המנויים, את הכרטיסים למשחקים, אנחנו אלה שממלאים את הווינר, אנחנו האנשים שמתיישבים ורואים את הטלוויזיה וגם משלמים כסף בשביל לראות את המשחקים, גם בטלוויזיה. אנחנו מעלים את הרייטינג, אנחנו משמנים ומממנים את התעשייה שמגלגלת ברובה, לעתים אפילו רובה ככולה, כסף ציבורי, וזוכים למינימום התייחסות חוזרת או דאגה לטובת האוהדים. אז כמו שאמרנו, המטרה של הכנס לייצר מודעות, להתאחד לרגע לטובת מטרה מאוד חשובה, שזו מטרה עליונה, לשים בצד את הנושא של היריבויות הספורטיביות, ושלא יגנבו לנו את הספורט. המטרות של הכנס זה הרחבת הידע ולימוד מניסיון שנצבר של ניהול מועדוני כדורגל אירופאים על ידי עמותות אוהדים, דיון פתוח במעמד האוהד בספורט הישראלי, חלוקת ידע ותמיכה הדדית בין עמותות וארגוני אוהדים בישראל, עידוד הפעילות המשותפת של כלל האוהדים במסגרת אחידה, הגברת מעורבות האוהדים לצורכי מאבק באלימות ובגזענות בספורט. אני רוצה קודם כל, לפני שאנחנו מתחילים, להודות למכללת נתניה, שהסכימו לקחת על עצמם גם העזרה בהפקה ובארגון של הכנס הזה. מרכז הפועל שתמך ועזר גם כספית לנושא. לארגון Supporters Direct שסייע גם באהבת האורחים המכובדים שלנו. Ben, that's for you. Special thank you for Supporters Direct Europe. Lucas and Ellen, thank you for coming as well. תודות לספונסרים שלנו של פיאט וביסקוטי על הכיבוד וחברת אבניר. סידורי חנייה, חבר'ה, למי שרוצה שיגיע לרנית, יקבל טופס כזה פתקית, אם צריך. לא צריך, הכל בסדר. יופי. ומי שרוצה מחר, בצהריים, בשעה 1, לשבת עם לוקאס, שאחר כך נציג את עצמו, בגדול הוא גם ב-Supporters Direct Europe, ויש לו המון ניסיון בכדורגל האירופאי ובעיקר בכדורגל היווני, גם באריס סלוניקי וגם פנתנייקוס. זה מחר ב-1 בצהריים בפאב הבקי בתל אביב, באבן גבירול 13. משהו קצת עצוב, הזמנו בעלי תפקידים בכדורגל הישראלי, כולם, לא פחות מ8 כבר הזמנו שהצטרפו ככה לפאנל, שלום רמי כהן, שהצטרפו וישבו בפאנל ואולי יקבלו כמה שאלות מהקהל ויענו, הם החליטו לסרב. שמח דווקא לראות את מנכ"ל מכבי נתניה שהגיע ככה במקרה לכבד אותנו, אז הוא יחליף אותם וייצג אותם נאמנה. בואו נתחיל, בן. בן is the first speaker in the conference. הוא משמש כיום... נכון, אוקיי, סליחה, סורי. נתחיל עכשיו רק בדברי פתיחה קצרים. דיקן הבית הספר למינהל עסקים, פרופסור ליברמן, מסר שהוא מצטער שהוא לא יוכל להגיע, מסיבה אישית. דוקטור אמיר פלינט גור יברך במקומו. תודה.
טוב, שלום רב לכם וברוכים הבאים לכנס האוהדים הראשון בישראל. בנימה מאוד אישית, אני מרצה לשיווק פה במכללה בנתניה קרוב ל-15 שנה, אבל כבר קרוב ל-40 שנה יושב בשער 7 כמעט כל שבת שנייה, וזה כיף גדול לראות פה מולי גם סטודנטים בפועל, גם סטודנטים לשעבר וגם מכרים מהטריבונה. זה באמת אירוע מרגש מבחינתי. אני מאוד מאוד גאה שבחרתם לקיים את הכנס הראשון פה במכללה האקדמית נתניה. אני מאוד מאחל ומקווה שיהיה לכולנו כנס מעניין ומועיל, ושיהיה לכולנו ערב טוב. לא צריך. שאני אציג את דיקן בית הספר לתקשורת, פרופסור דוקטור נייגר.
שלום לבאי כנס אוהדי הספורט הראשון בישראל. בשמי, בשם בית הספר לתקשורת שאני עומד בראשו, בשם המכללה, אני מבקש לברך את כולכם. אני רוצה להודות לעמותת האדומים ולארגון היציע על שבחרו במכללת נתניה כבית לכנס החשוב הזה. Welcome to our friends from abroad and thank you for coming to Israel to share your experience with us. כפי שאתם יכולים לראות מצבע חולצתי, מהסעיף כפי שאתם רואים, אני כאן בכובע כפול, גם כדיקן בית הספר לתקשורת וגם כאוהד של הפועל קטמון, קבוצה שיש בה הרבה קסם, ובמשך השנים שמעתי הרבה פאנלים שהתרכזו, דיברו על ספורט, בבעלי הקבוצות התרכזו, במנג'רים, בשחקנים, במאמנים, אך מקומם של האוהדים תמיד נדחק לשוליים, ואם הוא הופיע הרי זה היה בהקשרים שליליים בלבד, התפרעויות, זריקת חפצים, עונשים. הגיעה העת להזכיר בקבוצות ספורט, הבעלים מתחלפים, המאמנים מתחלפים, השחקנים מתחלפים, ואפילו עיצובי החולצה משתנים. הגורם האנושי הקבוע והיציב בקבוצות ספורט הם האוהדים, והגיע הזמן לעשות את הכנס הזה לכבודם ולדבר על מעמדם ועל תפקידם בספורט בכלל ובחברה. ואני רוצה לברך על זה שאנחנו עושים את זה כאן. שוב תודה רבה למארגנים מטעם עמותת האדומים, ארגון היציע. תודה לאנשי הספורט והתקשורת שמלווים אותנו היום, לאתר קיק שמשדר את הכנס הזה. תודות לאנשי הצוות כאן בנתניה, ובראשם לרנית פז שניצחה על הארגון. בהצלחה לכולנו.
אני אציג את הדובר הראשון. בן שייב, יליד לונדון, משמש כיום מנהל פיתוח בארגון ספורטס דיירקט אירופה. מעורב בסוגיות הנוגעות למינהל תקשורת ופיתוח לקבוצות אוהדים ברחבי היבשת. במסגרת פעילותו עומד בן עם למעלה מ-20 מועדונים במדינות שונות כולל ישראל. הצליח לפתח עקרונות עבודה בסיסיים זהים למרות תרבות אהדה שונות בכל מדינה ומדינה. בעברו היה מנוי בקבוצת ווטפורד. אך מאז שהפך המועדון ליצרן שחקנים עבור מועדונים גדולים ותו לא, הפסיק לרכוש מנוי. Good luck.
Sorry, I'm just searching for my presentation. Yeah, the trackpad is a bit unresponsive. Cool. I think that must be the one. Perfect. Okay, well, hello. As I believe Guy said, my name's Ben Shave. I work at Supporters Direct Europe. I'm from London. I'm a Watford fan. Unfortunately, Watford play in yellow, so given your rivalries, I decided to stay neutral with my clothes this evening. I thought it was probably a good idea. Thanks, first of all, to Isra fans and the Hadumim for the invitation. It was a real pleasure to accept. We've been working with supporters in Israel since 2008. And I think it's great that this event is happening now because from everything we've been discussing in the last few months and the last year or so, it's really clear that something is changing in Israeli football. For the first time, supporters are really being looked at as a solution to some of the problems and not part of the problems. And the reason for that is because of the work that's being done by people, throughout the country at supporters' trusts and supporter-owned clubs. So just to briefly introduce the organisation I represent, we were founded in the UK in 2000. The initial plan was just to help supporters set up supporters' trusts at clubs in the UK. But in 2007, we decided, with the help of UEFA, to move beyond just the UK. And as you can see from the map, I had to stick Israel in there at the bottom, so I had to play with the geography slightly. I hope you'll forgive me. We've been working with supporters in a number of different countries. Obviously, the fan culture is very different across Europe and across the world in each country. But as you can see, there are some core values: democracy, anti-violence, anti-discrimination, and a not-for-profit status. These are some of the core principles that all of the groups and all of the clubs that we work with share. And that's really important because although the situation in each country is different, as you'll hopefully see during the talk, there are things happening in different countries that reflect the fact that something is changing. So here's what we do. As I said, we help supporters set up supporters' trusts with the aim of helping them become involved in either the ownership of their club, and you'll hear about one particular case from the UK a bit later. We also advise clubs, governing bodies, and political institutions on the national and the European level about how to improve the way that football is run. And by that I mean by improving the way that football is run so that the supporters are more involved, because it's supporters who pay for the season tickets, it's supporters who pay for the television subscriptions. One way or another, supporters are the heartbeat of football. Without fans, there would be no football. And we believe that this should be reflected in the way that the game is structured. So these are some of our core beliefs. We believe that when supporters are involved in clubs, that the social and community value that clubs generate increases. So it brings them closer to their communities. It means that the communities can have more of a say in what goes on. We believe that there should be good relationships between supporters and other institutions in football. I understand that here in Israel, a particular problem is with kickoff times, for example, where they're announced extremely late, and the supporters are right at the bottom of the list of priorities. And we believe that this is for football, this is counterproductive, because supporters, if you want to look at it like this, supporters are the main customers. We wouldn't describe supporters as customers, they're far more than that. But, it would be like a supermarket opening, in the middle of the night when no one wanted to go. We believe that good governance and greater transparency are really important for sport. Again, because if football clubs or sports clubs are run just for the benefit of 2 or 3 people, then you're missing a massive opportunity to bring the community in. And we believe that all of these things can be achieved by democratic representation for supporters, not only at clubs, but also at national associations as well. So just to move on to a few examples of some of the work that the groups that we work with around Europe do. And when you discuss supporter ownership of football clubs, the first place to start really is Germany. The German football regulations say that by law, all football clubs have to be majority owned by their members. So traditionally in Germany, they were structured as members' associations, such as a supporters' trust, and that was the club. So you pay your annual membership fee and you get to vote in the same way that you do if you join the Hadumim or any other supporters' trust. After 1998, German clubs were allowed to separate their football section into a limited company, but even then, it was stated that the original members' association has to hold the majority of the shares in that limited company. So in this way, the German football system has ensured that the supporters, the members, are always right in the middle of the decision-making process, and that no commercial interests or any other parties can overcome them. They always have control. And you can see here some Borussia Dortmund fans making that exact same point. This was from a campaign a couple of years ago, as was this photo, when certain parties in Germany floated the idea of getting rid of the 50+1 rule. And there was a national campaign by supporters. So the last photo was from Dortmund. This is from FC Köln. Supporters from around the country made their voices heard and ensured that the 50+1 rule would remain. It's a similar story in Sweden. So in Sweden, they also have the 50+1 rule. And last year, actually, there was a very strong campaign to remove the 50+1 rule, because certain people argued, well, our clubs haven't been doing so well in Europe. Maybe it's time to bring in some private investment and buy some new players, all the familiar arguments. But what they failed to take into account was that the supporters, even though the teams weren't doing so well in Europe, the supporters were happy with the league. In Sweden, in the last 9 years, there have been 7 different champions. So it's a really competitive league. You know, you start the season with no idea who's going to finish where in the table. So it makes for a good product, an entertaining product. And the supporters in Sweden that we work with as a national organisation, they started a campaign, as you can see, keep the 50+1 rule. That basically translates as. And when it came to the time for the clubs to hold their AGMs, all of the members passed motions at these AGMs which made their directors support the 50+1 rule in public, so that all the moves to get rid of it were killed completely by the members, by the supporters. So those are a couple of examples of countries where supporter ownership is part of the fabric of the game, if you like. But obviously it's not like that in every country. One country where it's just started to emerge over the last few years is Ireland. So this is a photo from Cork City, where the club used to be owned by a property developer, and then the financial crisis happened, and unsurprisingly, the guy disappeared along with all of his money. The club was liquidated, it went into administration, and the supporters trust, decided to start their own club. That was in 2010, and I think the reason I picked this photo is because it really sums up what supporters are about. It sums up the contribution that supporters give to the game. Not only can supporters be involved in running football clubs, but without supporters, football wouldn't have an identity. When you watch football on the television or in the stadium, you look for the supporters. You don't necessarily look for what's happening on the pitch, because it's not always the most entertaining all the time, but it's the supporters that bring life to the game. And in Belgium, it's a similar case. This is a photo from a club called Beveren. Again, they were owned by an individual, a wealthy local individual, who decided that one day, while he didn't really fancy funding the stadium anymore, he decided to sell it and build flats on it instead. And he merged the club with another team from 20 miles down the road. So the supporters, again, decided to set up their own club. They play at the 9th level in Belgium. So they play, as you can see, in a park. But the point is that it's their club. They make the decisions on the colours, on where they play, on the players that they sign, on the community work that the club does. So they're now actually, from being a successful club that used to play in European competitions, you speak to most of them now and they say, well, we're happier than we ever were, because actually now we have a say. And that's, for us, one of the most important things, that supporters can feel like they have a say in what's happening at their club. So moving on to the UK, where I'm from, you may well have heard of FC United of Manchester. For those of you that haven't, just a brief history. So when Manchester United was taken over by the Glazer family in 2005, a large number of supporters, around 2,500 people, decided that, okay, well, this isn't for us anymore. Over years, they put up with increased ticket prices, kick-off times moved for the benefit of television, and a general sense that they were going one way and the club was going another. So when the Glazer family took over, instead of sitting there and putting up with it, they decided to start their own club called FC United of Manchester. And again, this photo really sums up what this movement is about. These are just your normal guys standing in the stands, and yet they can own a football club as well. They can be part of the organisation that owns and runs a football club. And since FC United of Manchester was founded in 2005, they've increased their members to around 3,000 now, just over. And they've raised around £2 million, and they're building their own stadium. So it just shows that you don't always need the help of what we call in English a sugar daddy, one guy with loads of money. That actually, if you put together a good project and you bring the community on board, there's no limit to what you can even. We've seen this in Israel and the work that's been done at Hapoel Tel Aviv. Without the supporters, the club wouldn't exist today, or it wouldn't exist in the same form. So this just shows that when you get together and you find the right people with the right skills, you can do anything you want. And this, again, was proven at Portsmouth. So Portsmouth, they won the FA Cup in 2008, which, you might have thought, okay, this is good, they're doing well. But actually, off the pitch, they were in absolute shambles. They had 6 owners in 5 years, most of whom can't enter Europe anymore, because if they did, they'd be arrested by Europol. They had gun runners, money launderers, you name it, these people own Portsmouth. Around 2011, the club had about £156 million worth of debt, give or take. It went into administration twice, and eventually, after a long campaign, the Pompey Supporters Trust took over the club. It was a combination of supporters, normal supporters, and also supporters that had done well in business and were willing to put in a bit of money to contribute to get them over the line. They didn't want anything in return, they just wanted to save the club. In total, they raised £7 million. They went to court and they won the case, and now Portsmouth is owned by its fans. So those are just a few examples of the power, if you like, of supporters when they get together. Now, obviously, you might think, well, okay, that's great if you're in Germany or the UK, but, how is this stuff relevant to what's happening in Israel, in Tel Aviv? But actually, I hope what I've shown over the last few minutes is that if you can unite behind a common cause, whether that's saving your club or building a stadium or bringing the club closer to its local community, if you unite behind a common idea and you work together and you put in the time and you put in the effort, then actually you can achieve pretty much anything. And as football supporters, this is something that we all deserve. Supporters really are the heart of the game, and we're at Supporters Direct Europe. We're proud to be working with people like this all over Europe, and hopefully returning football to its true owners. So thanks very much for listening.
אספר רק על החוויות שלנו עם ספורטרס דירקט. החוויה הבאמת חיובית שהייתה לנו הייתה שהבעלים הקודם של הפועל, אלי טביב, רצה להעביר את המשחקים מאירופה לאצטדיון רמת גן. פנינו לארגון ספורטרס דירקט ולקשרים שלהם באירופה, והם השתמשו בקשרים שלהם והמשחקים נשארו בבלומפילד. זה ארגון שיש לו המון כוח והמון יכולות, המון קשרים, וכל כל עמותת אוהדים, אוהדים שיש להם בעיה באירופה, יש להם גם את הקשרים בוופא ובאיחוד האירופאי, והם מאוד נכונים לעזור, אז כל מי שצריך אותם, שתיקח את האימייל של בן ופשוט תפנה אליו. טוב, הדובר הבא זה אלן לואיס. אלן לואיס זה בחור שהוא משמש כיום כקצין העיתונות והתקשורת של עמותת האוהדים של מועדון כדורגל סוונזי. הוא חבר בעמותה מאז היא נוסדה ב-2001. הוא יושב במועצת המנהלים של העמותה. הוא יציג את הסיפור המיוחד של סוונזי, שמעיד על עצמו, גם שוחחתי איתו בבוקר, הוא באמת ראה כבר הכל, משינויים בניהול, במקרים שהמועדון עמד על סף פשיטת רגל, מעבר לאצטדיון חדש, שחייה בתארים, ועכשיו הם באירופה הודחו על ידי נפולי. בחרנו את סוונזי כי בגלל המודל המיוחד שלהם, סוונזי יש בעצם עמותת אוהדים מחזיקה 20% בדומה לעמותת האדומים. יש להם שיתוף פעולה מלא מההנהלה הראשית, אז יש כמה שינויים. בואו נקשיב לאלן, תודה. אלן, it's yours.
First, a thank you for the welcome and the invitation for this event. It is indeed a great, it's a privilege and a pleasure for me to be here at the first Israeli Fans Conference, and I hope this will be the first of many more to come. That's me. That's our little strap line for the Swansea City Supporters Trust is here for a long time, not just a good time. I think that probably sums up what we're about, really. Now, this story is about a football club. It could be about any sporting club, actually, where fans want to get involved. And it basically tells of going from a situation where the club was sold for £1. It was at the very bottom of the English tier, the 4th tier. That was the situation, lots of debt. And it's now in the Barclays Premier League, that's the top league in England. It's free from debt. And last year, we actually won one of the major trophies in English football. That's the first trophy we've won in 100 years of our history. So all that in 12 years, how do we do it? I think the first thing is that some people now have begun to know about Swansea through the Premier League. But I suspect that there are very few in this audience tonight who know exactly where Swansea is. And it's probably significant because although we play in the English league system, Swansea is actually in Wales. And it comes under the Welsh Football Association. And that's got significance given the latest Euro 2016 draw, where, of course, Israel and Wales are in the same group. So it's an opportunity for you. If you haven't been to Wales, sometimes next year we're going to be playing Israel, probably at Cardiff, possibly at Swansea. But there'll be a great welcome if you want to get over there. So I say Swansea is in the southern part of Wales. As a supporters trust, we got started in 2001, and just to get a bit of background to that, we looked there at supporting the Swans has always been akin to riding a roller coaster. I'm sure any sort of fan of any sort of football club will know the ups and downs you get. In Swansea, it started, 1912, the club was formed. And for most of that time, it's actually been in the lower divisions of the English pyramid system. In 1980, I don't know if the name John Toshak, if you've got any Liverpool supporters here, John Toshak will be somebody that you'll know. Well, John Toshak came to manage Swansea, again, in the bottom tier of the English pyramid. Within 4 years, we'd actually got to the top division. 2 years later, we were out of the top division. 3 years after that, we were back down to the bottom with a load of debt. So there was a lot of history, really, and a lot of the people involved with the club now were around at that time as fans and realised that sometimes, there's success is okay, but it's got to be done in a proper way. But the situation really at the start of 2001 was that the club was owned by a London property company. Didn't really have any interest in the club. It had a lot of debt, and by the middle of 2001, that's all it wanted to do was to get rid of the club. It just wanted it out of its hands, really. A group of supporters were concerned at that time that they could see problems developing. The club had nearly gone out of existence 2 years before, and they could see that if this particular property company decided to pull the plug, the club could go out of existence again. So it got together over a series of meetings, just a handful of supporters at the time, and eventually in August 2001, with some excellent help from Supporters Direct, we actually formed our own supporters trust in Swansea, and the aim really was to save the club, because at that particular time it had just been sold from this property company to somebody who had previously been connected with the club for £1, but significantly nearly £1 million worth of debt had gone with it, and so that's where the Supporters Trust felt that there were going to be problems. So it got together, and the timing was pretty good, really, because in October 2001, the club was again sold for £1 to a London businessman who's actually based in Australia. And within days of taking over the club, he had threatened to sack half the first team. He had told the rest of the first team that they needed to take a 50% pay cut. And he'd actually sold one of our most promising youngsters for just literally a handful of money. So immediately the fans decided that this chap was not for Swansea, So there was a campaign to get him away from Swansea. The internet in those days was in its infancy, but I can assure you it was used to good extent to find, let's say, to find little bits of information about this chap, which was put into the public domain. So the fans decided that Tony Petty was the name, and there was all sorts of things, marches through the city, protests at matches, and as I say, there was some sort of, I suppose these days you could say, some fairly unpleasant things going on, which probably Mr. Petty didn't really appreciate. And it got to a point where by January 2002, he decided that Swansea was not the place for him. And fortunately, in the meantime, the Supporters Trust had been working to get together a group of local businessmen. And by January 2002, this consortium with the Supporters Trust very much in place literally bought the club off Tony Petty. And that was really the start of the group, which is still in existence today. They inherited a club with a huge amount of debt, right at the bottom of the English pyramid. And the significant things about the arrangement was that the Supporters Trust had a full director on the board, so they had full voting rights. And there were other things here. There was various vetoes and things. So this particular role of the Supporters Trust was not some token gesture. It was a very significant part of this consortium that was put together. Now, as I say, what we then had is a group of people, including the Supporters Trust, who'd never run a football club before. That there was our old ground, the Vetchfield, which was falling apart, frankly. There were significant debts. And in those days, as I say, we didn't win any trophies. And in fact, the only award we won at that time was one for the worst toilets in the Football League. So that was our only trophy at that particular time. But as I say, the group of local businessmen plus the Supporters Trust, and I should say at this point, and it's pretty significant, that these local businessmen were fans of the club as well. They weren't somebody that had just come along and poured money in. It was a fact that they had been fans. They'd seen what the club had gone through in the past, and they were determined that that wasn't going to happen again. in 2003, we got to a point where, despite all the efforts, the club had to win the last 2 games of the season. Otherwise, it would have fallen out of the whole of the Football League. That's how low the club had got. As far as the debts were concerned, it went out to the local community, and the local community wrote off a significant number of those debts in order to save the club. So again, it was the community getting involved. And basically from then on, it was a case of working hard. And I think we talked about dreaming big there, but I don't think anybody involved at that time really could have envisaged exactly how far that dream would go. But the people involved, one of the directors was an accountant, for example. One of the other directors was a lawyer, all giving their time free of charge. And that was the big sort of effort that went on. So, as far as the club are concerned, I try to sort of look at 5 aspects of why the football club succeeded. First of all, the chairman and the board, they had a clear vision about what they wanted. As far as the playing style was concerned, they knew the kind of playing style they wanted. They knew the kind of people they wanted involved with the club. And all of the, when they appointed managers, when they wanted to get players, they wanted to keep a particular style and a particular group of people that they knew we could work with. We worked with the local community. In 2005, the club moved to a new stadium, which was actually bought by the local authority, built by the local council. It is shared with the local regional rugby side, and it was very much a community facility, but very significant in the development of Swansea. As far as, again, we've talked about budgets, and again, as I say, the people involved were very careful. Financial prudence was a very key word in the way that the Swans developed. And this is quite a famous sort of saying by the current chairman, Hugh Jenkins, really. It's pretty sort of straightforward when you read it, but I'm not sure that many Premier League clubs understand that concept. And I suspect there's quite a few clubs around the world don't understand that concept. But for Swansea, it's very much a case of you only spend what you earn, and if you can't afford things, then so be it, really. Then I'd say I mentioned the right type of people. Again, when we appoint managers, or when the club appoint managers, they don't bring a manager in who's then going to change everything, bring in his own players. We appoint a manager who actually understands the way the club works and carries on in the same sort of format, really. So it's not a case of imposing a management style on the club. The club has its style, and the club recruit to that management style. Similarly with players, we have a certain type of club. It's a community club. It's a club where the players mix with the fans, and so again, it's a case of getting the right person to play. It's not just a case of their ability on the pitch. They also have to make sure that they, mix in off the pitch as well. A couple of things here. It's the patience is one thing. This is about Rome not being built in a day, just in case you're wondering where that was. And again, it's similarly the risk aspect. Yes, the club did take some risks, but they were very calculated, and they certainly didn't spend bigger than they could. So that was very significant, really. And at the end of the day, again, beyond people's expectations, in 2011, it was a sort of a famous day at Wembley Stadium, the playoff final of the English Championship, which saw the club actually promoted to the Premier League, something that just 10 short years ago would have been quite unbelievable, really. But again, the important thing is that this was all achieved very much in a sustainable way. The club made profit. Normally, you see clubs going into the Premier League and they're spending in order to survive. But the Swansea model was very much a case of we can only spend what we earn, and at the end of the day, if that keeps us in the Premier League, so be it. But if it doesn't, we're not going to get into debt to stay there. But to stay there, we have for the time being anyway. Fingers crossed. So again, we come to the actual supporters trust itself. And again, another 5 aspects about that. Our supporter director, this is the actual supporter's voice on the board, if you like. Very much a key figure in the way the trust operates. And it's probably fair to say initially there was some sort of skepticism about how this was going to work, whether or not a fans representative on the board was going to operate properly, and would he be listened to and what have you. So it was a case of the supporter director working very hard really to build that trust. And it's probably fair to say now that, and I don't think anybody would argue with this that you speak to, that supporter director is very much part of the DNA of the club. He's involved in every single decision, and he's a key figure in whatever goes on at the club. So he's very much part and parcel of the club, and not really some sort of isolated figure, really. The second thing is, again, about respecting our past. We've done a lot of work at the stadium. Although it's a joint stadium with the rugby club, we've tried to make sure that the history of the football club is represented. And there's a few statues around there, and we introduced a wall of fame. These are past players and things like that. We've also produced various books to celebrate our centenary last year. It was last season. We try again to keep the club and the fans connected. This is something we are sort of very keen on. There are quite a few Premier League clubs who talk about fans forums. These are normally fairly sort of structured events where selected fans perhaps turn up at a meeting to talk to the chief executive. Now, down at Swansea, we hold at least a couple of fans forums every year. And literally anybody can turn up at these meetings. There's no entrance fee, there's no vetting of people. They can turn up, and we have the chairman. He's the one biting his nails, by the way. The manager, this was when Michael Laudrup was there, and a number of first-team players, and literally anybody can ask them anything about any aspect of the club on or off the field. And to be fair, the answers are quite sort of frank and open. And we do something similar. We have a number of supporters based in London. So if the club are playing up in London, we try and do something similar there, where the chairman, the manager, and some of the players, again, it's an open house, ask them any questions you like. Every year we hold a 10-pin bowling event. That's where basically all of the first team turn up at our local 10-pin bowling alley. They each allocated a lane, and the fans literally play along with them. Really, it's a great event. There's lots of children involved there, but believe me, the adults are just as involved in the thing as well. So again, it's just keeping the club, the players, and the fans integrated, and not, even though we're in the sort of the Premier League now, it's something that we've been very keen to carry on. And to be fair to the club, they are happy to do it. Listen to fans in difficult times. This is the 3rd season in a row now, I think, that we've been able to agree with the club that season ticket prices have been frozen. Again, very significant in these days. Season ticket prices in the Premier League are one of the biggest sort of concerns of fans, and to freeze prices for 3 years has been, very significant for us. Communication is something that we try to do on a regular basis, newsletters and emails to the fan base, just to let them know what's going on. Success, well, I think this is basically about the fact that we're very much involved in running the club. We've made our contribution as far as the fact that the club is well run. And by and large, one of our main aims, and people ask us, given the success of the club, what's the point of the supporters trust? And that final one is something that we always come back with, in that the trust is there, if you like, as an insurance policy. We like to think that and there might well be a time when some of the other shareholders decide to sell, but we are going to be there right from day one. We'll know exactly who's interested in the club. We'll know exactly what sort of terms they're coming in on, that sort of thing. So that's why I think it's important, as far as the trust is concerned, that this is there for a long time, not for a good time line. What we've learnt, again, you can sort of see there, working with the community, absolutely vital from our point of view. Similarly, communication all the time. The third one there is something that I think is quite valid. There will be times when perhaps you don't feel that you're getting the support that you might do. But those are the difficult times when you just have to, carry on and get through it, really, because that's where, again, the fourth one about being organised and things, because there's nothing worse, I think, than having just a sort of a bunch of individuals who decide that they're going to represent somebody but are not organised or professional. Seeking out advice, again, and another plug for Supporters Direct, who've been very helpful to us. And the final one is another one, really. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Rome wasn't built in a day, that sort of thing. It is indeed a struggle sometimes, but ultimately, it can be very positive. We're working now to extend the stadium. The stadium we have is actually the smallest in the Premier League at just over 21,000. So that's something that's active at the moment. And the other interesting thing, as I mentioned, that the club had been going for 100 years. Well, up until recently, we never had our own training facility. Even in our first year in the Premier League, the club actually just worked out of a local sports club. And you had the footballers, the Premier League footballers as they were then, actually showering with the fans. It was all sort of that. So the club, again, wanting to have a legacy, really, we don't know, the club didn't know how long we're going to be in the Premier League. There's a lot of money floating around the Premier League, and what they wanted to do was to make sure that money was invested, not just frittered away on players' wages or what have you. So we are now, in fact, we've finished one training centre. There's the furthest, there's the stadium, and this in the foreground is the initial training facility that was completed last year, primarily for our academy. And we're just about finished now another £15 million development on the outskirts of the city, which is going to be the main training centre for the first team. So two huge investments coming out of the Premier League legacy. Again, we've talked about, doing things differently. This was the sort of Premier League table at the end of last season, and at the bottom there, QPR, Queen's Park Rangers, a London-based club, very much a club that poured money into the club when they went into the Premier League. Ultimately, it didn't do them a lot of good, and they ended up getting relegated last year, whereas we ended up with a profit, at 9th place in the league and a trophy. So sometimes throwing money at a particular thing doesn't necessarily bring you success. So the message really is, first and foremost, to get involved. It's your club, whether it's whatever sporting club it is. Ultimately, it's your club, your future. Get involved with it. Sometimes there are situations where the clubs are doing quite reasonably well, and it's not necessarily. Let me try and get rid of that. You think, well, why should we bother? Well, there may well be times when that changes. And that is not the time to get yourself organised. The time to get yourself organised is when perhaps things are going okay, so that when the time comes that there are problems, you are ready and able to take. And ultimately, you say, stand up for the most important people at your club, which is you, the supporters, and look ahead. Really, when the Supporters Trust was formed in Swansea, it was all about survival, but we did look ahead. I don't think we sort of expected to be where we are 10 years ahead, but it was a case of, okay, let's plan for the future and let's see what happens. And what did happen is that's a sort of a motley looking crew, which is the Trust Management Board for this year, and they're holding the League Cup trophy there, which was won by the club last year. I mentioned getting the right people. Now, we did have, as one of our managers in the sort of early days of the club, Roberto Martinez. Some people may know him now as the manager of Everton. Roberto actually started his first management job with the Swans. He'd been a captain beforehand, and he then moved on to Wigan, who he took to win the FA Cup last year. And he was very much a supporter of getting sort of fans involved, and hopefully you can. This is what he said when he was a manager of the club. No, it's not. Now, which one of those says go back? I did. It's not that one there, is it?
One second.
I think we are very lucky because I know that the chairman and the board.
שאלתי אותו בבוקר, הוא מצייר תמונה מאוד מאוד ורודה והכל מדהים, אם יש להם בעיות. תשמע איזה בעיות היה להם. בגלל הרווחים שלהם, אז הם חילקו דיבידנד, הם 20% מהמועדון. והייתה להם בעיה של איפה להשקיע את הכסף. זה הבעיות שלהם.
I hope it's worth waiting for. What's calling in?
I think we are very lucky because I know that the chairman and the board, they are true supporters, but then we've got the supporters trust as well that they will always keep an eye and keep that balance through the seasons and at board level. And you need that. I think we are very, very fortunate.
Just moved on to the next slide now. And that's all from me. Thanks very much for your time.
בן, can you come here? אז לסיכום על הדילמה שלהם, מה לעשות עם ה-200,000 פאונד שנשאר להם דיבידנד, אז אלן אמר לי ש... They decided to save it for a rainy day. Lucas, maybe you come as well. Just... אני אספר לכם רק על לוקאס בקצרה. לוקאס זה יליד סלוניקי, הוא משמש היום כקונסולטנט בספורטרס דירקט יורופ. הוא חבר בעמותת האוהדים של ארי סלוניקי, אשר תחת ניהולה פעל המועדון. הוא ניהל בפעילות הקרן והיה אחראי על הקשר עם החברים בעמותה, תכנון וארגון של האספות הכלליות, תקציב, הנהלת חשבונות, שיווק. בכל מקרה, לוקאס יהיה מחר, אנחנו קצת על... לא יהיה לנו זמן יותר מדי של לוקאס ירצה, אבל מחר הוא יהיה בפאב בשעה 1 בבקי, וגם עכשיו בהפסקה אתם יכולים לשאול אותו שאלות. ובינתיים, למי שיש שאלה וכל דבר, אז זה הזמן, הם פה. יש מיקרופונים בצדדים.
I have a question to you, Ben. Two questions, please. Yeah. Number one, do you also, I mean, supporters direct, does it also help basketball teams? And another question, if some guys here that came here want to start a team, start a supporters team, what kind of help do they get from your organization? And does it include financial help?
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
Yeah, sure. The basketball question, I mean, the answer is yes, sort of. So we're funded to work in football, but a lot of the clubs that we work with in countries like Sweden and Germany, they're multi-sports clubs, so they have basketball divisions. And there's no reason why the principles that, I talked about earlier can't be transferred to basketball. It's about supporters owning clubs. It doesn't have to be football, because basketball is a sport, and ultimately, people feel the same emotions about basketball as they do about football. So yes. The second question, what kind of help can we provide? Well, I mean, we can help you together with the expertise from people like Isra fans, like Shai. We can help you developing a structure, like a governing structure that's fully democratic and fully transparent. We can help you put together a strategy, a business plan. We can give you ideas for working in working together with your community on certain projects. Whatever you need, basically, this is what we're funded to do. Financial support we can't provide because we ourselves are a funded organisation. But what we can do is, commit to helping you seeing it through to completion. And in some cases, in some countries, we've helped groups get access to funding themselves because, what the idea of supporter ownership and what it generates is actually something that's extremely good for the community, both on local level and on the national level as well. And actually what you often find is that there are either mainstream politicians or community organisations that are willing to finance this sort of thing because they can see it's, like I said, that it's good for the community. So direct financial help we can't provide, but we can help pretty much with everything else.
מישהו רוצה לשאול שאלות גם בעברית, אפשר בבקשה, אנחנו מתרגמים. Thank you very much. אלן, בן ולוקאס יוצאים יחד איתכם עכשיו להפסקה, תרגישו חופשי לפנות אליהם ואנחנו ניפגש כאן עוד 20 דקות. תודה רבה.